Hello, good morning. I hope you've all had a good weekend. First thing on a Monday morning, I thought I'd post a pithy new video. Um, Very short and simple set of statements I'm going to make, not like previous videos. Um, First of all, the march in Hong Kong against changes to Hong Kong's extradition laws went ahead yesterday. It was attended by 1 million people, and I can certainly personally attest to the fact that there were myriad people in and around and on the way to Wan Chai and Causeway Bay and Admiralty, these areas of Hong Kong where the march took place. I was moving around Hong Kong and Kowloon yesterday. If you're not in Hong Kong, these are the districts in which the city of Hong Kong is situated. There were myriad people, as I said. So the march itself was very well attended. It would make perfect sense that as the march was so well attended, 1 million people is a very, very significant number of people in Hong Kong. It is approximately 15% of the population, of the local indigenous population. Given that it was so well attended, it speaks to the strength of feeling amongst the local population about the proposed changes and the risks to the rights and freedoms of the local population. It's therefore even more incumbent now on the government of the Hong Kong SAR and members of the Legislative Council, LegCo as it's known colloquially, to think on their positions and to consider how they will vote in the upcoming votes in LegCo on this issue. Given the strength of feeling, it's incumbent upon them to consider either withdrawing the measure from the legislative timetable for the time being, or to consider very significant revisions to the proposals along the lines of those I mentioned last week. If they don't, as I said, they are delegitimizing themselves, delegitimizing their position and their right to make law for the people of Hong Kong. The law in a democracy, or whatever the franchise may be, Hong Kong is not a pure democracy by any means. There is a franchise, but there are also functional constituencies which are hardly democratic. But nominally, Hong Kong is a democracy, and it does exist under principles which have been imported and adopted by Hong Kong from the time that it was under British administration. And it's a foundational principle of the English common law. As it operates in Hong Kong, it is now Hong Kong's law, that rights once given cannot be taken away. This is antithetical to the rule of law. And clearly the proposals that have been made are antithetical to the rule of law. They do dilute the rights that are enjoyed. It is the birthright of every citizen of Hong Kong to enjoy the rights and protections of the rule of law and due process of law. And the proposals that are under consideration at the moment clearly are in direct opposition to those principles, and they have exercised opinion very, very strongly here in Hong Kong, as yesterday's march demonstrates. And therefore it is incumbent on the government of the Hong Kong SAR and LegCo members, and in particular Carrie Lam, who has taken a very, very obdurate position on this, behaving more like a dictator than the leader of a democratic government, to think again and to consider reasonable amendments to the proposed changes. As I said, otherwise the government and the legislature, they delegitimize themselves, which is dangerous. It is dangerous. A government creates an impossible situation for itself and for its citizens if it delegitimizes itself, if it no longer has the confidence of its citizens. The social contract, the basic foundation of the agreement that exists between the governed and the governors, the people and the government and the legislature, breaks down in those circumstances, and therefore it is incumbent, more so than anything else, upon the government of Hong Kong and LegCo to consider their positions carefully. I'd like to make a more general point that it's no wonder that there is a crisis globally in the principles of democracy, that democracy seems to be undermining itself throughout the world, not only in Hong Kong, but in Britain, where there was a referendum held in 2016, in June 2016, it's almost exactly 3 years ago now, on Britain's membership of the European Union, a topic I've already discussed at greater length in previous posts. And almost 3 years later, the referendum result, which was a vote to leave the European Union, has still not been implemented, and there is still no consensus whatsoever, and it seems that there can be no consensus in Parliament itself on how to implement the vote, how to implement the results, the outcome of the referendum, which was a vote to leave. And regardless of one's position, one is a leaver or a remainer, that was a plebiscite of the people. Parliament abdicated its responsibility by giving the people the choice to make this decision. They made it. Parliament MPs are not happy, they don't like the result, so they want to overturn it. That is not democracy. It is not democracy. How do we reconcile the sovereignty of Parliament and the sovereignty of the people? That is the great question of our time. And that is the question that is undermining democracy globally. Because it seems that this narrative peddled by the far right and other extremists that there is an elite that surreptitiously governs the world and works against the interests of the people. It's clearly conspiracy theory nonsense of the worst kind. It's nothing but poppycock. But it does lend itself very strongly to the argument that the establishment, the governing class in society, is contemptuous of the rest of society and governs according to its own vested interest. And this is undermining democracy everywhere, including in the United States, where Donald Trump, the worst that America has to offer, a terrible human being in every conceivable way, was elected President of the United States after losing the popular vote. He won the Electoral College, but he lost the popular vote. Therefore, one could argue that he, in himself, is democratically illegitimate. We see these pressures throughout the world, throughout every system that considers itself to be liberal and democratic and open. It is a very serious time. We are standing on a precipice here, in which democracy itself, the principle, the foundation stone of modernity, essentially, is under very serious threat. Because it seems that it no longer functions. It seems that, yes, the state, the government, the legislature, in many different countries, seems to hold the opinions of the people in contempt and seems to want to act in its own interests, which seem to be against the interests of the people themselves. So, as a general point, I urge all parliamentarians, wherever they may be, and I urge all members of governments, wherever they may be, to consider very carefully your words, your actions, and your deeds. You are the representatives of the people. You legislate, you lead in their names, in the name of the people, for the people, in their interests, not in your own. And you delegitimize yourselves by ignoring the will of the people. Of course, I'm not suggesting for one moment that the will of the people become the dictatorship of the proletariat. I'm not a Marxist. I'm not a Leninist. I am a liberal internationalist. I believe in the rule of law. I believe in all of those principles that are the essence and the building blocks of the English system, the British system, which has been exported to many different parts of the world. Limited government, the rule of law, freedom, protection of fundamental rights. All of these principles need to remain in place and need to be the foundation stones and the watchwords of every free and open society. But these principles need to be protected and respected as indissoluble, as the bulwarks against dictatorship, against extremism. It is incumbent upon every parliamentarian, upon every member of every government, in every democracy, wherever they may be, to think carefully and to consider these principles and to make those the binding principles on which they act. Okay, that's been quite a heavy post for today. I am going to post something else a little later on a lighter topic. It's going to be on my pet peeves. Those sorts of things that get to me and I'm sure get to some of you as well. And maybe also another poetry post later today. So stay tuned. Peace out.